As I can, because I know you guys want to get out of here. I'll try to do it in 10 minutes or so. I presented the first part of this presentation at LD 17, my old legislative district. And basically what we were doing is we were going into the Tempe mayoral and city council election, and we had in my precinct 8 precinct committeemen slots and 8 precinct committeemen, and I tried to come up with a strategy whereby we'd be able to get out the vote effectively. So what did we do to do this? We used Voter Vault. Back then, Voter Vault 3 was the tool we had. Every Arizona precinct committeeman has access to Voter Vault, or had access to it. And it's easy to use. You get a manual. This is the manual. It's 10 pages. There's 10 pages to figure out how to use this system. And very easy to use. If you can use the internet, you can figure out Voter Vault. Plus, they've got telephone support and other support. And all you needed was an internet connection. You had to use Internet Explorer. It wouldn't work with any other browser. A printer, so you could print out walking sheets. And then now, instead of Voter Vault 3, we've got this thing called GOP Data Center, which is better than Voter Vault 3. I used it last night for the first time, and it works. This is not hard to do, but it takes your initiative. The precinct committeeman has to do this. All precinct committeemen get access to the new GOP Data Center. So here's the example. My old precinct, Tempe 59, before the 2012 Tempe city election, we had 895 Republicans in it. And again, 8 PC slots, 8 filled. Of the 895 Republicans, 36.75% are perfect voters. They voted four times in the last 4 elections, primary or the general. So we figured we're not going to touch those people. They'll probably vote. On the other end of the spectrum are the 0-4 Republicans. Those are the people who haven't voted in the last 4 elections. 7.3%, 66 of the voters of the 895 were what I call VINOs, voters in name only. You know, they're registered, but yeah, gee, why should I vote? You know, and they're probably good people. They just need a nudge, you know, and that's what the PCs have to do, nudge them. 113 were 1-4s. They voted once in the last 4 elections, and 121 were 2 of 4 voted 50% of the time. And then 20 were the 05s. These are the people who just moved into the precinct, no stats for them, or they just turned voting age and they just registered. There were 20 of those. And then the 3-4 voters, we were going to treat them like the 4-4s. We're just not going to bother with them. They'll probably vote. I wanted to limit the amount of time for each PC as little as possible, try to be as targeted as possible. So to recap, add up those numbers. 320 voters. 320 voters, again, what I call the VINOs. They're voters in name only. And we had 8 PCs to nudge or touch them. So that's 40 voters per PC. Now, approximately 30 of the 40 were early voters, so 30 phone calls, door knocks, and literature drops for the early voters for each PC. When the early ballots went out, that's what we did. And then we followed up with the other 10 phone calls a few days before Election Day. This is my section of that printout, walking sheet. I basically, this was about 8 or 9 pages long. I counted down about 35, 40, drew a line, put my name there, continued on. Bob, the guy across the street, he was going to get the next 40 names. And then this is how I kept track of everything. As I made almost every voter in Voter Vault has a phone number. I called them, I wrote down how the call went, and then I used it again in the general election. So, what little did we do? To make those phone calls, stuff literature bags. We did a sample ballot. It's a nonpartisan election, so most Republicans don't even know. You can't put a R or a D on your sign or on your literature. So most Republicans, they don't know who these people are. So we took our ballot, our early ballot, and we wrote on it, these are the fiscal conservatives, these are the tax cutters, these are the people who are going to repeal the regulations, these are the pro-business people, and then we filled in who to vote for, okay? So, and then we put that in a bag, and then we dropped those bags off after we made the phone calls at their doors. Took about 3 hours each. Okay, 3 hours before the primary election, about a little less than 3 hours for the general, because we'd already done it once before. So what were our results? Compared to the citywide average of all voters, we had almost double the turnout of Republicans in both the primary and the general election. I'll give you some hard numbers in a minute. So our conservative mayoral candidate survived the primary. One of our 2 conservative city council candidates survived. So we did it again in the general election, and like I said, this time it took less time because we'd already done it once before. So we had, in my precinct, 46.8% turnout of Republicans. Citywide average for all voters, 26.6%. And both our candidates lost. The mayoral candidate lost by less than 1 percentage point, 139 votes. I'm convinced if he had done this in every precinct, instead of doing whatever the heck his consultants told him to do, he'd be our mayor now. So we had 431 of 919 Republicans vote for 46.8%. That number changed, see, because that was the actual number. The 895 number we had before, that was based on older data in voter vote. Democrats, they only turned out 39.8%. Those vaunted independents that everybody thinks are so great, only 34% of them voted. Party not designated, a whopping 17.2%. Libertarians 3 of 13, and Greens 1 of 5. So the total number of ballots cast was 898 of 2428 for a turnout overall in our precinct of 36.9, but we got 46.8% of Republicans. One other thing that we did, we added to this. We, using some data that through George Teagarden and Jenny White from LD20, she got us the names of the independents who always asked for a Republican ballot. That added 5 or 6 names for each of us, and we did those too, and almost all of those independents voted, and I think they probably voted for our Republican candidates. So, what could have been a landslide for these voters? Just do some analysis here. Tempe had 25,843 active Republican voters. Assuming that 33% of them were like the voters in our precinct, that meant that you'd have about 8,605 voters to go nudge to the polls, you know, the 50% or lower people, the binos. So, and let's assume that you assigned 40 of those to each person you were going to hire to get out the vote. That would be 215 bodies. Times 3 hours, 645 man hours, $10 an hour you could pay them, 6,450 per election, per primary, per general. Total 12,900 bucks. Divide that by the 3 candidates. The 3 candidates could have spent 4,300 bucks a piece to go hire 215 people to do this in every precinct. But we did it in our precinct for free, so they wouldn't have had to spend any money for us. And if they could have got all of the PCs to do this, like I said, they could have done it completely for free. Except, of course, we only have about 50% of our PC slots actually filled. So, I've been told that one of the candidates spent well over 100,000 bucks on get out the vote, and then lost. And I think actually that number is much higher, but I don't have any verification for that. So what to do now for our general election? Forget the primary. Let's focus on the general election that's coming up. Here's what you got to do. You got to get this form. That's the first page of it. See how complicated it is? This is the GOP data center access agreement. It's Voter Vault had a 1-page agreement. This one is 2 pages. The gray, blue areas, that's what you have to fill in on the first page. That's what you have to fill in on the second page. Then after you do that, you either fax it down here to headquarters, you email it to Teresa Martinez, or you mail it. Look, I'm a nobody, and I'm an idiot. but I'm a persistent nobody and a persistent idiot. If I can figure this stuff out, you guys can too. It's really not that hard. Here's the instruction set for how to print out one of these, like we did. With Voter Vault, it was 10 pages. It's 7 pages with this new system. It's even easier. Okay, and with this system, you can actually pull in those independents who always vote a Republican ballot. You can do that too, so it's even better. So we've got to focus. We've got to really focus now on getting out the vote in this most important election that's coming up. And this strategy works. Okay, so I've already used this now, the data center. I did this last night online. In my new precinct, which is my old precinct, with a little bit of an addition to it, it's bigger. Now we've got 1,446 total Republicans. 620 of them are these vinos. But we've got 12 precinct committeemen instead of 8. We've filled up all the slots. So that's 50 voters per precinct committee. So it might take a whole 4 hours before the general election to contact these voters by phone and drop some literature off at their door, and maybe even talk to them at their door to save civilization as we know it. So all you need is Internet Explorer. I found it didn't work with Firefox, so I used Internet Explorer. It takes a little bit of time and an internet connection. That's all it takes. And last slide here is how to find volunteers and new voters. I've got a friend down in Florida. Down there they use a club system as opposed to a legislative district committee system. They'll break their committees into clubs. And so he's in Volusia County, the home of the Hanging Chad. And what they did is they went out to festivals, county fairs, whatever. And when they were doing voter registration and trying to get volunteers, they'd create a sign something like this. And all it would say is this: stop Obama here. And then they put an arrow on it, like an arrow. If it was down here, they put an arrow up. If it was off to the side, they put an arrow towards them. Now you don't have to deal with any Democrats coming and wanting to register to vote. The only people you're going to get are people who really are already on your side but might not be registered and might not know how to volunteer. So that's the end of my little spiel. Thanks for your attention. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Oh, by the way, one other thing. This is what my new printout looks like. This has all the vinos in Corbell Precinct, 620 names. We're going to divide that up. Yes, Chuck.
That is not a walking list format anymore, correct?
Yeah, there's all different sorts of ways you can print it out on data center.
And this is something that's accurate right up to right now, because 2 weeks ago I talked
I don't know
to her
about that.
and she said that it is not a walking list of the traditional way of going up the street one way, coming around and come back.
No, you can do it. You can do it that way.
That's terrific.
That's what it showed on there. Have you seen the screen?
No.
Well, I have, and that was one of the options. So, but look, one other thing I wanted to say is this: data center is probably adequate, but I recommend every legislative district look into some other tool. Like I looked into yesterday, political gravity, which American Majority gives away, which was incredibly powerful, including being able to have your walking list right on your smartphone with survey questions where if you were at the door and you were doing a survey, as they answered them, you'd touch a button, yes or no, and it would update the database on real time. So look into other tools. I highly recommend looking into either our votes or political gravity, and there's another thing called Nation Builder. You can find those on the internet. Thanks. Unless you got any other questions.